Hello and welcome back to the Sidetracked Sport podcast. I'm your host, Jasmine, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking about the female coaches in sport and their experiences of getting into sport, but also why is it that we see so little women in coaching roles at the grassroots and elite level. And joining me for today's episode is Emma Paget, an athletics coach. Hi, Emma, how are you?
Hi, I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. I'm really excited to get into this topic, and I think you're going to be able to provide a really interesting perspective for us, and we'll get into why as we go along the episode. But do you want to start off by giving us a little bit of an idea into your background in athletics as an athlete and then moving into a coach as well?
Yeah, sure. I started athletics at a very young age, at about 11, tried all the events as you do when you're a junior athlete, and gradually became more and more interested in high jump, and heptathlon too. Did that as a junior and then ended up going to Loughborough University where I competed in high jump for the university and the club there, and then captained the athletics club, competed at Bucks, competed kind of national level. And then I was kind of still progressing within the event, and unfortunately had quite a serious injury and ruptured my Achilles. So from there, I tried some other events, but it didn't really give me the same love as high jump did. So I decided to start coaching and exploring that pathway. Completed my assistant coach qualification, started going down to Leicester Courtanians athletics club and working with their really young athletes. So they're under 13s, doing the run, jump, row and the fundamentals. Did a little bit of work with Oxford University with their high jump squad down there too. And then very organically, a coach asked me at Loughborough if I would like to come and work with a female high jumper and also do some high jump with some of the decathletes there. And that was about 4 years ago. And then I got very much hooked from there and have gradually developed a group that now I have a group of high jumpers and heptathletes, all sorts, competing at all sorts of different competitions and levels. So I've got some people competing more at county level all the way through to an athlete competing at the Commonwealth Games this summer.
It's really interesting to sort of see how almost quickly you progressed from being an athlete into sort of coaching through a somewhat unconventional way of you sort of were forced that you weren't allowed to compete anymore and you just loved the sport so much you wanted to still be involved to the point now you've got a really big group actually. And it's quite exciting to see. And going through that process of getting your qualifications and sort of becoming an assistant coach and going through all of that process, were there any moments in that you found being a woman more difficult in any of that, whether it be that there were no other women on the courses or you just hadn't seen any other female coaches sort of growing up? Was there anything that felt like a barrier, big or small, for you in that process?
I don't think I've come across any huge barriers in terms of my kind of coaching pathway. I think I was very lucky as a child that I had some really fantastic female coaches. So my first ever uh, high jump coach, Moira Maguire, she was amazing and she really, really inspired me. And then there was also Anne Scott, who worked alongside John Scott, and they supported me a lot growing up. So there was a lot of really positive role models for me going through the age groups in terms of female coaches. When I came to Loughborough, I would say there were a lot less female coaches. So even if you go down to the track now, I think you'd probably see about 80% male coaches, which is interesting in a sport where it's the events are 50% male, 50% female. There is a huge disparity in terms of the numbers and the gender balance. But I think in terms of my coaching pathway, there weren't a huge number of female coaches on the courses I did. Again, I'd say it was similar in terms of that 80-20 split. But I feel like the experience I had was really, really positive through the assistant coach and the athletics coach qualification. Interestingly, I've just done my level 3 qualification, so the event group qualification, and that one is very much online based. So there's a lot of videos to watch, there's a lot of documents and reading. So it can be a little bit lonely doing it that way, I think, when you're online and going through, a lot of videos. Sometimes I think it would be very beneficial to maybe have like a mentor or have another female coach or even just a more experienced coach that you could work with. So I think particularly as you progress through the qualifications, I think it the face-to-face contact reduces, but actually I think it would be beneficial to have more of that. And I think particularly for female coaches, as much as Ilona Maher, says imposter syndrome, she doesn't have imposter syndrome. I think for a lot of females, they sometimes do. And I think maybe having that mentor or someone that they could speak to regularly while going through would be really helpful, just to try and support them through that process.
Since you've been on your coaching journey and sort of been pretty established as a coach, you've had a lot of changes in your personal life. You recently became a mother as well.
Yes.
And so how has that impacted you, I guess, as a coach, separately to actually just the reality of becoming a mother?
Yeah, so it's had like quite a big impact in terms of my coaching. I suppose I've now got another little person I've got to consider all the time. So I can't just, go straight down to the track whenever I want. I've got to consider her. It has been challenging because I can't bring her to the track. So the rules of the track say that I can't bring her, which makes it very difficult when she's really young. And particularly as I'm breastfeeding her, it's important that she's close to me. So I returned to coaching 3.5 weeks after having her, which was great. And I was so happy that I was able to do that, because I think it's so important that you keep the things going that you really want to do, even when you become a mother, and, you want to try and not have those barriers. But it has definitely been a balancing act, and I've had to get used to that, trying to leave her. And maybe whereas before I might spend 4 hours at the track, I now can only spend an hour and a half at the track, because I've got to go straight back. So I think, yeah, it's definitely been a challenge, but a really exciting one. And it's been a big change, and she's come to lots of competitions with me. She's 12 weeks and she's already been to tracks in Wales, Scotland, and across England. So, yeah, hopefully she'll get involved in athletics at some point. But yeah, it's been a challenge. But I think it's really important, though, that the athletics community try to create more inclusive tracks. So, where women or parents generally, not just females, may be able to bring their children, or there is support in place to help them come back to coaching. Again, I think that mentoring aspect is important, where maybe there is women who have had children, and they're able and they can support other women with how they've managed to get back into coaching. So I think if we can create more inclusive tracks and training venues, that would support more females back into coaching after they've had children.
It's a really good point because, like you said, your time is suddenly no longer just your time. You're having to share that time with a little tiny human. And when you look at sort of returning to the sport so quickly, did you ever experience, I guess, any sort of mum guilt? I've heard athletes often talk about that when they return to their sport really quickly. Is that something you felt at all?
Yeah, I've actually felt that a lot. So I really wanted to go back quickly because it was Bucks coming up, and she was born in March. So, just before the start of the season. And, before her, my athletes were almost like my children that I was supporting. So I really wanted to make sure they were ready for the season. But then it's really difficult because you've got a tiny baby, you want to support your athletes, but then you also want to be home making sure that your baby's okay. So yeah, I've definitely felt that, and it has been a balancing act. Like, luckily my husband's really supportive because he's involved in athletics. So there's been a few times where we've been kind of passing her over in the car park. But yeah, it's a really hard one. I think I think you have to realize, like I said before, that, you've still got to keep doing the things that you want to do. And I think actually keeping doing those things, and supporting athletes and keeping, really positive mental health by doing things like that, I think makes me a better mum actually, rather than always being with her. So I think, by doing those things, I think it makes me a better mum overall.
That's something that I have heard, like, with a lot of other athletes that actually, whilst maybe in certain moments or, like, for a few weeks or however long, you might feel the certain aspect of mum guilt, actually, by prioritizing the things that you're also interested in and make you happy, you feel like a better mum and you can show up better for your kid as well, and that's always important in your own mental health when becoming a new mother, because it is a massive change, and then trying to balance sport alongside that. I don't know how how you do it. It seems impossible to me, but it's really impressive. And I guess it's probably also another reason why we maybe do see so little women in coaching roles, because balancing the family aspect of it, it does often fall on the women. And obviously you've said that your husband's really supportive, but not everyone necessarily feels that. And the maternal responsibilities always do tend to naturally fall on the mother, particularly in the early stages when you are breastfeeding, because only the mum can obviously do that. And so, how do you think things like balancing family life can impact coaching in at the grassroots and elite level as a woman?
I think it's really interesting because I think athletics is predominantly has volunteer coaches. So at the moment, I'm on maternity leave, but when I go back to work, I will then be at work all day without my daughter, and then I'll be coaching in the evenings. So if I don't have her there as well, that's a really long time not to spend with her, and you do get that mum guilt. So I think that's really difficult. But then I think also if you're a professional coach, um, in athletics and in other sports, I think, there's a lot of professional coaches who are self-employed. So I think for them, they may feel that they have to go back and coach more quickly than maybe they want to. They might want to go back straight away, but they may have to go back more quickly for financial reasons, or because they've got short-term contracts that they need to fulfill. So I think having a family is definitely a challenge. I think it's a really good challenge, but it's a real challenge if you are in coaching, whether that be professionally or within the volunteer sector. And that's just where I think it's important that we just try to be as inclusive as possible with, supporting mothers and new parents. And I think it can be done. I think, it was interesting. I took my group away warm weather training last year to Portugal, and on the same track, you had young mothers walking around with prams doing fitness, and you also had world record holders like Mahuchik. She was training on that track at the exact same time, and it did work. Everyone respected each other, and it did work in terms of the track. So I think you can do it and it can work, and parents can feel included and they can be successful coaches with the right support network, and with individual clubs and also governing bodies putting the infrastructure in place to do that.
When we look at how many women are in coaching roles, there's two bits of data I want to share with you, and I actually think they're pretty contradictory, which is I find very interesting. So UK Sport found from data that was produced in 2024 that the number of women coaching Summer Olympic and Paralympic sports in the UK had almost doubled from 2020 to 2024, going from 10% of coaches were women to 20%, which seems like a really good positive, and that seems
Yeah.
great for those sports. But then UK Coaching found in data they released last year that there'd been a decline of 6% in the number of female sports coaches in the UK. And they've obviously got different data sets and they'll have collected it differently. But I think it's really interesting to see that even two studies done so closely together have found two very different things. And what has your experience been sort of in athletics, seeing other coaches around you? Have you felt like it's sort of just stayed the same, increased or decreased? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is interesting in terms, and I have actually heard that. I heard the UK coaching stat around the decrease between, the kind of 6% decrease, which I think is really sad. You'd hope that it would be going the other way. So, yeah, I think that's a really sad statistic. I think within athletics, I haven't seen a huge change. I think the numbers have stayed, from what I've seen, there hasn't been a huge increase in the number of female coaches. Um, I did see, I think there was a study done in 2021 that said there had been no female team coaches with an athletics team at the Olympics
Wow.
at all. And the first time that there was team coaches that were female was in 2024, where they took two,
Wow.
which is quite unbelievable that was the first time. So I think, that is progress, which is great. And similar to what you were saying, there is progress happening, maybe at that elite end, where, sports are increasing the number of team coaches that are going to these major championships. But overall, we're obviously there are still barriers, and the overall number is decreasing. I think the it's interesting because I think there's quite a big push on that elite athlete to coach um progression, or pathway. And I think the governing bodies are pushing that. So, where you've got elite athletes coming to the end of competing, or the end of their careers, they then have the opportunity to coach. But actually what I've seen is a lot of coaches, a lot of elite athletes want to coach elite athletes. So I think there needs to be more done to try and get a wider range of coaches, male and female, um, into the sport. And it might be that we need to try and start tapping into maybe younger athletes who are deciding that they don't want to be part of the sport anymore. Could they go down a coaching pathway? Or, there's a leading athletics qualification, that you can do from 14. So can we go into schools, and can we work with young females in schools who maybe think that, like, sport isn't for them, but actually they might be really good. They might be really good coaches, and they might be great at working with people. So I think there are lots of things we can do to try and increase the number of coaches overall, and particularly female coaches. Whereas I think at the moment it is too focused on that kind of elite athlete transition, which I don't think always works in terms of getting your kind of grassroots or development coaches through their qualifications and into clubs.
It's a really interesting sort of point you said about maybe trying to get some of the people that are dropping out of the sport early, who aren't elite athletes, but just love the sport and have enjoyed the sport and haven't got a good knowledge of it, seeing whether there's a way to tap into getting them into sort of the coaching route. Because yeah, we do see a lot of the coaches, particularly in athletics, because it is voluntary. A lot of the coaches, a lot of them are maybe of retirement age, and so because they maybe have a bit of extra time, and so they sort of think, why not help out down at my track? Or they've maybe had kids that have gone through it and have started coaching because their kids have done the sport. And I think it would be interesting to see a different approach in trying to, I guess, sort of attract people into it whilst they're younger and get them in sooner, so that we do just have more coaches in general, which means there's more people who can specialize, there's more athletes that can get coached, and we just see a wider range of people at that level. And I think it's also interesting to see what other sports are doing to try and encourage more people into the sport as coaches, because earlier this year, FIFA had announced that all of their all teams in their women's tournaments have to have at least two members of female staff on their bench, and at least one of them has to either be an assistant coach or a head coach. And I think that's a really interesting perspective to take, because they're making that mandatory, and that's the sort of aim to try and just increase the amount of women that are in those coaching roles. And whilst at the moment there's maybe not quite as much depth in really, really, really top level women coaching in the sport, if you make that mandatory, more, I guess, young girls will see women coaching at that level and go, "Oh, I'd maybe like to coach one day. I'd like to be a manager," and I guess take up those roles. And as much as it's maybe a slow process, it will hopefully work, I'm guessing. What are your sort of thoughts on implementing a policy like that and sort of going, you have to have coaches in the sport that are women?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think, you want to get the right people in roles. You don't want things to be really forced because, that's when you get people that become disgruntled and say that they're only in roles because they're female or but I think it is important and we've got to give opportunity. So I think, starting to have policies where you do have to have a female within the team staff. I think it is really positive, and I think it will hopefully, like you say, then you'll have young girls thinking, oh, actually, I could coach. And I think it's the same, we've seen the rise of the lionesses, the red roses, and we've seen that, how positive that's been in terms of getting young girls into football and rugby, and possibly coaching is the next thing. So it might be that, not all those young girls that have tried football and rugby are going to be elite players, but maybe they'll be coaches and maybe they'll be grassroots coaches. And I think that if we can do that, then that's really positive because we keep people within the sport just in a different way. And if we can do that within athletics, where we can get more young girls who maybe have decided, actually, do you know what, athletics at the moment isn't for me, but I still want to be involved, whether that be through coaching or even officiating. I think that would be really positive. So yeah, I think it's important, and I think it's taking positive steps to try and increase that number. So it's interesting that FIFA have done that.
And I think that's a great point you made about how actually just seeing more of like the lioness, like the red roses, seeing more elite athletes at that level in women's sports. Naturally, there will then be more young girls who in the future will become coaches just organically because they like the sport and maybe don't want to play, or for some reason, maybe like yourself, get an injury so they can't play. And so actually go, you know what, I might take the coaching route, and that will happen organically as we go through. And I also think it's interesting to see how many women's coaches there are, in the sense of there's a lot of young girls who feel uncomfortable when talking to a male coach about things like their menstrual cycle, periods, if they're not feeling like 100%, if they've maybe got a heavy flow and it's impacting how they feel physically on the day, whether it's training or competition, and actually how having women in those coaching roles can open up that a little bit more, that conversation between coach and athlete. And you obviously have a training group that's got a lot of boys in, so it's maybe not quite so applicable for you. But how would you like to see that conversation sort of evolve and change between sort of coach and athlete?
Yeah, so I have all my high jumpers are male at the moment, but I do have also a group of heptathletes who are all female. And I think it's interesting because if you look at a lot of the research, it does suggest that females have that more emotive side when they're coaching. And like you say, they may be able to have conversations that, some male coaches may find difficult. So I think having a greater number of female coaches and also having male and female coaches working together, I think is really important. So, I work really closely with a male coach in Loughborough, and maybe, it might be if he had a female athlete, he could come to me and say, actually, could you have that conversation? But at the same time, I think if male coaches have the right training and they have the right support, there's also no reason why they can't have those conversations too. So I think it's a bit of a balance. I think having more female coaches coaching female athletes, gives provides opportunity and maybe might make some young girls feel more comfortable in terms of those conversations. But also, I think it's providing a space for male coaches to be trained and develop their knowledge and skills, and then they will then they'll feel comfortable having those conversations too.
And it's going back to something you mentioned right near the start. We sort of look at athletics as almost being sort of 50-50 in gender split. Women can now participate in all the same events as the men. It's all equal in terms of that. However, when you look at other sports, it's not quite as on an equal playing field. Athletics, say at a world championships or whatever, in the same stadium at the same time, competing on the same track. And
Hmm.
whereas in football, rugby, cricket, we're not seeing the same sort of similarities. And there's also that debate of whether men should stick to coaching the men's teams and women should only coach the women's teams. And because athletics isn't so sort of divided in that sense, you don't really get that sort of split. So what are your thoughts, I guess, in looking at other sports? You mentioned in how athletics, like how it can be good for a man and a woman to sort of work together in coaching. Do you sort of agree in how that might look in team sports as well?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I think I do really think male and female coaches working together works well. I think they bring something really different. They can bring something really different to a coaching setup. When I was growing up, I mentioned at the beginning, John and Anne Scott, they were a husband and wife team. They still coach up in Edinburgh. They're very different in terms of personality, but they work really well together in terms of getting the best out of their athletes. Even though they've got slightly different skill sets. I think in terms of team sports, I don't think I think it's just the way, like you were saying, because men play, it's a men teams play in a stadium and then they've got all their fans and then women will play at a different time. I think, it's become that men coach men and women coach women, but actually I don't think there's any reason why, women can't coach men and men can't coach women. It's just, I think as women's sports become bigger and bigger, particularly with the team sports, I think we will see that shift in terms of coaching, but I think it's just on a journey at the moment. And I think it's, like I said, I think at the moment that journey has been getting more females into playing the sports. And we've not quite seen the point yet where we're seeing more coaches and more female coaches, whether that be coaching women's teams or men's teams. But in athletics, I don't think you see it as much. I think you see female coaches coaching lots of males and male coaches coaching lots of females. You don't see that split as much. So yeah, I think it will happen in team sports too, but I just don't think we've quite got to that point on the journey yet.
It definitely is more, I guess, even in that split in athletics and that you don't have the divide. And I think it's maybe a good framework for other sports to look at and be like, actually, it can work. Like, why are we, I guess, being so silly about it? Because it
Yeah.
really doesn't matter at the end of the day. It's more down to whether the coach works with the team rather than is the coach a man or a woman. And for some teams, perhaps a woman might be better suited depending on personality. Who knows? It might just be coincidental. But I mean, you could argue that one of the best coaches in women's sports at the moment across all sports is John Mitchell, who coaches the Red Roses. I mean, his record on the pitch with that team is just insane. And then when you actually look at his relationship with all of the women on the team, like they just seem like they do get on so well. It doesn't come across that they have any sort of hardship of feeling towards him. Not that I feel like they would, but they genuinely seem like they would be friends. And like I think he got a tattoo with Ellie Kildun after they won the World Cup or something. And it's all just like it's very weird, but you love to see it. And it's just proof that actually a man can be just as successful in coaching a women's team as a woman can be. And I am just really excited to see and hopefully eventually get to the point where we can see women's coaches going into the men's game, whether it be football or rugby, whatever sport, and seeing them at the top level as well. Because that's something that we see a lot less of because I think there is more men in the coaching and managerial positions that naturally they get those roles. Whereas I think when we see a woman coaching, say in the Premier League or the Gallagher Prem, I think that's going to be a big step forward. And hopefully it's not too long of a wait away.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it's interesting with the Red Roses because that works so well. And I think that's where skill set and personality, he is perfect for that team, clearly, because you can see the success of it. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to recruit people on their skill set and their personality and match that up rather than it being on gender. And yeah, I think it is really exciting to see, hopefully in the next few years, see, more female coaches that work well with teams or match with teams well. I think it's interesting though, because I think there was a study done a little while ago around applying for jobs. And is it that men generally, if they have 20% of what's on a job description, will apply for a job, but women need to have like 80 or 90%. So
Yeah.
I think there's maybe some work needed to do there in terms of trying to encourage female coaches to apply for jobs as well in those coaching roles. But that's probably a slightly separate thing that needs to be done. But I think if we can encourage more female coaches to apply for these roles, I think we'll find that actually their skill sets and personalities will work just as well with men's teams and women's teams as the current male coaches do.
Yeah, I think it's only such a barrier at the moment because it's not the norm and we're not used to seeing it. Whereas once we get a few women in, it'll start to sort of trickle through, hopefully, and we'll be fully integrated, having men coaching women coaching women, and women coaching men, and all of it. Because, like we said, like athletics, that is just normal, and you kind of don't question it. Like no one would look at you coaching any of the guys in your group and go, hold on, why is she coaching them? They should have a male coach. Like that just would seem ridiculous. And so hopefully that'll translate into other sports very soon as well. And I think it's a sort of great little message to end the podcast on as well. And I want to say thank you so much, Emma. It's been really great chatting to you, and all things from sort of how becoming a mother has changed your perspective on coaching, all the way through to sort of looking at team sports and how we can maybe progress to having more women in different roles as well. And thank you to everyone for listening and getting sidetracked with us. I will see you in the next episode. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Jazz. Bye.